You may have heard that nutrition can boost our fertility, and by a lot, up to 69%. But where did this come from? And what exactly did these women do to have that significant of a change? Well, today I'm breaking it down with my guest fertility nutritionist, Grace Armstrong. We'll be covering the study that started it all by outlining the 5 specific swaps that led to such an impressive change seen in almost 18,000 women. We'll also explain the rationale behind the changes and how exactly they impact fertility. Get your notes out for this one or put this on replay because you're not going to want to miss these 5 steps to boost your fertility by 69%. Welcome to the True Fertility Podcast. I'm your host, Lea Nicole Trujillo, therapist turned fertility emotional wellness coach, and I'm here to share the tools that helped me and my clients reclaim their joy, unpause their lives, and triple their pregnancy rate. With a 100% success rate in emotional well-being and a 60% pregnancy rate, I'm here to radically transform your journey. Join me and my amazing guests for expert strategies, practical tips, and real-life trying to conceive stories with a dash of girl talk. So let's sprinkle some baby dust because it's time for True Fertility. Hi guys, welcome to another episode of the True Fertility Podcast. I'm your host, Lea Trujillo, and I am here with my friend, fertility nutritionist bestie, Grace Armstrong. Thank you so much for being with us again today, Grace.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me on again.
Yeah. If you guys didn't know or catch the previous time Grace was on, this was on season 1. She was actually the first guest that I ever interviewed. So thank you so much for suffering through that with me.
It was amazing to chat to you, as it always is.
Yeah, but you gave so much great information on that last chat. And again, every time I look at your social media feed or your blog, you put out so much high quality, great information about nutrition that I, had to have you on to discuss and get your take on this study that I've always been interested in about the 5 different things that you can do to significantly impact and change your nutrition, which I see so many nutritionists reference actually. So yeah, I'm so excited to talk to you today about that.
Yeah, this is a great study, and it really does highlight just some basic changes that you can make in your diet to see a really dramatic difference in fertility. So, super happy to dive into that today. And we'll kind of go through the ins and outs, what the study said, and then some take home points so people can actually start to apply these things really easily.
I love that. I think that's just what I need, and I'm sure plenty of my listeners would need as well to get that insight in very specific points. But before we get into that, I wanted to give listeners your background. Grace is an accredited nutritionist who specializes in fertility and pregnancy nutrition. She runs East to West Nutrition, which is a virtual clinic dedicated to optimizing fertility health to increase the chances of conception and prepare the body for a healthy pregnancy through expert and personalized nutrition. So, just had to put that out there because we got to give you all the credit because you're amazing again. So, yes. And also, before we get into it, I wanted to do my fun little, if you remember from last time, my little rapid fire questions.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Yeah, definitely, because we want to get to know you a little bit on a little bit deeper level. So, my questions for you this time, I have 3 of them. So, the first one is I know you're a nutritionist, but I've also heard you say some things like you don't really cook as much as most people expect a nutritionist to cook. So, what is your cooking life like and what is that can you break that down for us? What are you like in your real life? How does that work for you guys and your family?
I do cook a lot, but I don't enjoy it. I don't want to spend ages in the kitchen. I just want really simple meals that the whole family can eat, including my daughter and my partner and I have relatively different tastes preferences too. So we want something that everyone can eat and it's healthy. It ticks all the points of what we want it to. and it's simple and easy to cook and doesn't take more than 20 minutes and it's good. So pretty basic things, but all of them hit the point.
Yeah, well, that sounds like the best of both worlds, essentially. I mean, if you're not enjoying the cooking process so much, 20 minutes sounds doable. And I think for most of us, if you know what you're doing, 20 minutes is totally enough time to cook, pretty wholesome, nutritious meal. So, yeah.
Yeah, just planning ahead. That's the trick, planning ahead.
Yeah, having all the ingredients necessary.
Yeah, and even
Um,
just the mental game of what you need to cook each night, just having that in the back burner so that you're ready to go and you're not constantly questioning, what are we going to eat today?
have a little meal plan prep on the calendar.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, another thing that I'm always interested in, and I was actually just talking to you personally about this a second ago before we push the record button, is I want to know more about your world travels. So I understand you are going to Argentina very soon from when we're recording this, but you're also originally from the UK and you currently live in Australia. So tell me a little bit about that. And also tell me, obviously English and English, UK, Australia. And do you speak Spanish too, though?
So I'm learning Spanish very slowly, but I am learning it. I can understand it. I'm just slower to reply, especially if there's a lot of them speaking together. It just can be difficult to keep up, but I am trying. I'm hoping that this trip kind of makes it a bit easier. But yeah, I'm from England originally. My partner's from Argentina. We actually met in Indonesia, but we both live in Australia. I moved over to Australia when I turned 18 and spent most of my 20s traveling. So, going to many places. I was lucky to go to many places: Asia, India, Europe, all through Central and South America. So, I think I did that for about 8 years.
That sounds like so cool and so interesting. And
Yeah,
so
it was a very
Australia,
fun time.
yeah. And so Australia is where you ended up settling down. Tell me also, I've never visited Australia. And I always hear you associate kangaroos with Australia. I want to know, are there kangaroos in Australia? Do you see them regularly? How is that like?
I do see them quite regularly, actually. Where we live anyway, we are close to the beach, but we have like bush behind us as well. So even if you drive like 5 or 10 minutes inland, there is
Uh-huh.
kangaroos. More often you see more wallabies than kangaroos, which are like the little kangaroos. Quite common.
I have heard of the term wallaby, I think from a Nickelodeon show when I was little. So I didn't realize they were kind of like smaller versions of kangaroos.
Yeah,
Really
they're really
cool.
cute.
Are they just
Actually.
out in the open?
So in residential areas there is them. Not if it's super suburban and there's traffic around, but if you go a little bit further back where there's more open space, more greenland and bushy areas, which we live in a place where there is that, you will see wallabies often, especially in the morning or the evening, just in someone's garden or whatever it might be.
Oh my gosh.
They are pretty friendly, yeah. Especially in some areas, like they'll come up to you and say hi. Kangaroos less so, and you do need to be sometimes cautious of kangaroos, especially if they have babies. But often wallabies are pretty friendly.
Real deal is with the kangaroos and wallabies and the wildlife in Australia.
That's about it.
Okay, well, those are my rapid fire questions, but I also wanted to have a moment for you to share a little bit about kind of how you stepped into what you're currently doing today, which is again specializing in nutrition for fertility and pregnancy. How did your path take you here?
Yeah, sure. So I had a background in nutrition, had been studying it for a long time, did my honors in it, so wrote a thesis in nutrition science. And it was through my own pregnancy complications and wanting to better support my body through that I really dove into fertility or pregnancy nutrition. And Really just cementing in that it is that time before you get pregnant that has the biggest role on the health of the pregnancy, the viability, and the health of the baby. How little that is known, again, amongst the general population. And that's just when we're able to have the biggest impact as well. I just really wanted to focus my attention there.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And, thanks for sharing that. So, with that, moving forward, let's jump into our topic of today, which is focusing on what are these 5 things that you can switch that can lead to a significant boost in your fertility by 69%. And where does this come from? Grace and I were speaking, and I was able to parse that down. And Grace actually has a copy of this study. The study that we're referring to is by Shavaro, Edwards, Rosner, and Willett. It was in 2007. And it is called Diet and Lifestyle in the Prevention of Ovulatory Disorder in Fertility. It originated from the Department of Nutrition at the Harvard School of Public Health, and it was published in Obstetrics and Gynecology in 2007. It's a pretty large study. So, I'm seeing that it was about 17,544 women were studied. Is that correct, Grace?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So the study was run through, I think it was 1991 to 1999. And the population was from another study called the Nurses Health Study. I think it was around 116,000 women were contacted. And then the study was narrowed down to the 17,000 that you measured. And they looked at 5 specific changes within nutrition to support ovulatory infertility. So it's one of the largest nutrition studies that has been looked at, and such a good population as well. So it definitely gave the area a lot of direction when it comes to the correct things that we should be advocating for when we're looking at nutrition and supporting fertility.
Okay, awesome. Well, thanks for sharing such a richer background on this study there. And just a question as far as I don't know if you're clear on this, but when it says, are these recommendations for all women struggling with fertility or who want to optimize their fertility, or is this specific to women who maybe are not ovulating regularly?
Yeah, so with the study adjusted for people who had another known cause of fertility struggle, so that could be endometriosis or it could be a male factor, and it just looked at people who had ovulatory infertility struggles. But it's not to say that this isn't applicable to someone else who maybe fell into a different category. We know that a lot of the basis for these recommendations and the underlying reasons why they are relevant could be applied to the greater population. I think interestingly, they actually foreseen that the results in this study may be more relevant to the general population, and that was down to the degree of obesity that was measured in this study compared to the general population obesity. So what that means is when they adjusted for BMI, 10% of the study population were classified as obese. One of the major factors was looking at the contributing factor that weight potentially has on fertility. And knowing that the general population's obesity rates are sitting around 1 in 3, it could be that these results are more applicable to the general population that we see today.
Love that. Okay, yeah. So that makes more sense. And then hopefully, again, we can apply this to more women, essentially, are going to benefit from some of these targeted things. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, let's get into it. Let's hear all of them. So, and I want to share, and I just kind of want to go one by one. And I want to make sure that we're very clear on exactly what that means, the recommendation, and in real life, what foods would meet that criteria for what they're recommending. So the first one is swapping low fat dairy to full fat dairy. What does that look like specifically?
Specifically, it looks like just opting for full fat or full cream dairy products that aren't labeled as low fat. So that's a relatively easy one. to be able to make those changes. It's actually interesting in this study that there wasn't a real reason why this is the case. Like, it's not hypothesized. It's not an obvious underlying reason like with the other factors that they considered. In other studies, it has been hypothesized that it could be due to the manufacturing methods that low fat has gone through in comparison to full fat. Interestingly, in male fertility studies, they found the opposite to be true. So, where low fat is supportive of male fertility and high fat is less supportive of male fertility. Obviously, this poses a little bit of a what do you do in a situation if you're both looking to optimize your health for fertility. Clinically, I don't feel like this has a huge impact. We often focus a lot more on the other points before we look at this one, because I don't think it's that easy just to suggest that you have two different forms of dairy in the house. It just becomes conscious of what you're having as a couple and what might be better for each of you.
Wow, that's so interesting that women react differently to full fat versus low fats, like skim dairy products, and men as well. So that's so interesting with that. But that is definitely an easier switch. I think though, like for most of us, I in particular, like haven't had like whole milk in forever, So it's like, I don't know now. It's like you're so accustomed to this like 2%, 1% milk that I don't know, kind of the thought of full fat dairy kind of like grosses me out a little bit. But I'm sure once you start drinking it, and I'm sure maybe it's probably even tastier. Who knows?
Yeah, I think with all of these things, there's a lot to consider. Obviously, we need to consider people's taste is a big one, and we need to consider their general preference, how much they're having, the different forms of dairy that they're having, and how it sits in relation to what their other diet looks like. So there's always a lot to consider. And I think with any type of study like this, it's going to be difficult to say, well, this is the standalone factor, because, they looked at everything and there was obviously different compounding things that impacted all of the results. People who were more likely to follow these dietary patterns also had lower BMI and they engaged in more physical activity. There is things like that obviously you do need to account for those as well.
Yeah, no study is perfect. You can't control for every factor, especially with such a large group of people and for such a long span of time.
That's
So,
exactly
yeah.
right.
Okay, and the next one is swapping trans fat for monosaturated fats. So let's
Mhm.
explain that. What is trans fat and what is monosaturated fat?
So your trans fats.
Has infertility taken too much from you? Are you unsure how you can keep going on this path? Maybe you've tried some affirmations, but it's just not cutting it. If this sounds like you need the Resilience Roadmap for Trying to Conceive. It's a free step-by-step guide to reclaim your joy and unpause your life that I use with clients to get unparalleled results. Get yours today by going to www.leanicolecoaching.com. That's LEANICOLE coaching.com, or check the show notes for the link.
Would be in things like your processed foods. So thinking of, takeout food or oily foods, prepackaged foods that are heavily processed, looking at, discretionary chips, chocolate, sweets, like those types of foods. Also looking at processed meats contain trans fats as well, and saturated fats, which isn't mentioned in this study, but it is important to note. And then monounsaturated fats would be from our nuts and seeds and olive oils and, the type of like avocados, the type of like healthy fats that we promote for fertility. Yeah. So that is how you would define the two different ones or where you're looking to go with them. And this is believed to be due to the inflammatory factor in part by this and the onset of BMI, I guess. as one factor as well. While we know that BMI has a lot of issues with it, it is often used in studies like this, and it does have some relevance. We're also looking at that factor, but it one of the main reasons would be looking at inflammation.
So, with that, is it that the preservatives in these packaged foods are trans fats then? So, like anything that's preserved is essentially going to have that trans fat in it?
Oh, it's not being preserved that is a trans fat. It's the actual form of the fat. So the chemical structure of the fat is different and it responds differently in your body. So with a trans fat, that is going to be more susceptible to oxidative stress and inflammation,
Mhm.
which is bad processed or packaged that the issue is. It's just looking at what the fat is used in there and how it reacts in your body. So it's not to say that prepackaged foods are the issues. It's just that foods that have been prepackaged, that have been heavily processed, and obviously processed is a really large term, like lentils are processed. So we don't want all processed foods. We're really looking at the ones that are heavily processed. Your processed meats, so burgers, sausages, deli meats. Then we're looking at oily, heavy foods like your chips and your fried food and fried chicken and things like that are going to have more
Mm.
concentration of trans
Mhm.
fats in them.
Okay, so it can also be, again, related to the type of fat that they're using to create the food there. So, like butters and different non olive oils and things like that.
Yeah, exactly
Okay.
right.
And I definitely hear you, sharing. You don't use it in these particular terms like trans fats per se and monosaturated fats, because again, that's a pretty scientific terms. But I definitely hear you, sharing this with the general public and I'm sure with your clients about trying to avoid those heavily processed foods and meats. So, from my take on it, is that you definitely feel like this is something that can help move the needle for fertility for your clients.
Yeah, 100%. This becomes a large focus point. We understand that from previous studies as well that high levels of inflammation are often detected in around 70% of infertility cases. Always supporting it, reducing inflammation down becomes a focus point. And one of the best ways to do that is to have more of these poly and monounsaturated foods and less of the trans fat and saturated fat foods.
Okay. I did not know that 70% women or people struggling with infertility have some of that inflammation as a factor in what's going on for them. So thanks for that. Next one, swapping refined carbs to low GI carbs. What does
Okay.
that mean? Help break that one down for us.
Yeah, so your refined carbohydrates would be things like your white grains, your white pastas, your white breads, your white rices. When you eat them, your body releases the energy quickly and that can kind of spike blood sugar. Then that's you're looking at insulin resistance and glucose homeostasis, where your lower GI foods release the energy much slower. When we're looking at low GI foods, we're looking at more of our whole grains. So our brown grains, brown rices, brown pastas, brown breads, but also quinoa and spelt and millet and buckwheat and all of these other beautiful grains that we can find. And again, that is down to the insulin resistance factor and maintaining glucose homeostasis and the role that that has on ovulatory infertility.
So with that, if your glucose is higher, that can, or less stable, essentially, that can affect your body's ability to ovulate?
Yeah, so we know that blood sugar control has a big influence on how our body runs in general. And when we're looking at the production of regulation of sex hormones, it does impact that as well. So it's not to the point where, you need to be like hyper focused about what your blood sugar is doing all the time. You don't need to go that far if you are not pre-diabetic or diabetic, but it's just having a conscious awareness of, these foods do support fertility, they do support your blood sugar control and insulin resistance, and just incorporating more of those into your diet and less of the refined sugars.
Okay. So let's not have white bread. Let's try to go with whole wheat bread. Got it. And next one I have here is including plant protein And also, I noticed in the study, it also mentioned and getting iron from plant protein.
Yeah. So the iron, I think, is a little bit more controversial. When you look at other studies, we know that iron from plant-based sources is going to be less bioavailable, potentially 50% less bioavailable than heme, so meat iron. So in terms of that, it does become easier to get iron from meats. If you are a vegan or vegetarian, then adding in some vitamin C can help your body's absorption of non-heme iron. But this one's a little bit more controversial because there is definitely other studies that suggest that for some people it's going to be beneficial to have iron from meats or heme sources just to actually support their iron level, because iron deficiency is pretty common. You're looking at 1 in 4, I think, in some places.
Wow, that's a lot. Yeah. So to clarify, when they're talking about like plant versus animal protein, are they suggesting that you don't have animal protein at all? Like switching to a vegetarian diet to get your protein sources?
Yeah.
There.
So they're definitely not saying have one or the other. You don't need to pick a side. It's just being conscious of introducing more plant-based sources are going to support ovulatory fertility. I think it's swapping 25 grams of animal-based for plant-based. You're going to be able to improve ovulatory fertility by 50%. So 25 grams looks like one serving. So rather than having, say, a chicken breast, maybe you have a cup of lentils or, a serving of lentils or chickpeas. And this is considered down to the potential inflammatory factors that animal protein has, where we look at plant-based protein. It actually helps to reduce inflammation down. It has less saturated fat in it. It helps reduce inflammation. But also in plant-based sources, there's a higher fiber content, and fiber helps hormone support. There's also a lot of phytochemicals and phytoestrogens in plant-based proteins as well, and they are considered to support fertility.
Wow. So lots of different variables within that plant-based protein that can really contribute to overall improvement in various factors of your fertility and your body. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly
And
right. And I was just going to say, just to touch on again, like you really don't have to pick a side and go all plant-based. Just even introducing some in your diet as a daily basis, either switching it out or introducing it on top of, your animal protein, because often under eating protein is quite common. So most people could probably benefit from having an extra dose of protein through the day.
nice. And when we say plant protein, what are some good sources? I know you mentioned lentils and chickpeas. Any other ideas or suggestions for where we can get some, beefy, beefy in quotes, plant protein sources? Are you interested in getting the answer to this question? Well, this is your personal invite to join our exclusive Facebook group to dive deeper into the world of fertility with bonus clips, behind the scenes content, and intimate discussions. Here you can connect with fellow tribe members, share your experiences, and contribute your insights to shape the future of the show. And it's easy to join. Just search True Fertility Tribe on Facebook, answer a few questions, and you're in. I also have the direct link in the show notes below. See you there. Let's move on then to the fifth and final point for this study. Dun dun dun. Take a multivitamin.
So this one just looked at taking multivitamin on an average of 6 days a week and the influence of that on supporting fertility. We know that even the best person's diet could still be lacking in particular nutrients. We know that when we're looking at supporting fertility, we always want to aim for optimal levels, which potentially could be difficult to reach from diet. So probably introducing just a really good prenatal supplement is one of the easiest things that you can do to support your fertility. And a good prenatal supplement is going to contain a good amount of all the essential nutrients, your zinc, your choline, your iodine, your magnesium, your B vitamins, really everything to support all the different processes that they support with infertility and looking at ovulation support and egg quality and everything else.
Love it. And when choosing a multivitamin, do we get this at the grocery store? Is there a particular
Mm.
recommendation?
I mean, definitely they're not all created equally. While they all might have beautiful marketing behind them, it doesn't mean that they are all similar. Firstly, it's important to consider we do need the essential minerals in there. And then we need the essential minerals in the right forms, which becomes a little bit trickier because, obviously they all have different names and some of them sound really similar, but we essentially want the most bioavailable form. And then it's important to consider the dose. And the dose, while there is good benchmark doses of what we should be aiming for, they really should be supplementing your diet. So don't have a particular thing in your diet, then that's an area that you want your prenatal to focus on. So when you're picking a prenatal, like ideally you would get advice around what's going to be right for you and your body. If that's not possible, then looking at not just the generic pharmacy brand one. So looking at potentially practitioner only ones or looking at higher quality ones that you all the right ingredients in the right doses in the right forms.
Yeah. Okay. Love that. So thanks for clarifying that because again, most people when we say, okay, I need a vitamin, it's so readily available at our grocery. You just go and choose the cheapest one and you just put it in your cart. But yeah, I am starting to become more aware as I've been on this journey as well to be more cognizant of the quality of the supplement that you're taking because I don't know about in Australia, but in the States, they're not something that is regulated. So you may want to splurge a little bit here and try to make sure that you get yourself something that is, a little higher quality and making sure that you're actually getting what you're thinking you're getting out of your vitamin.
Yeah, exactly right. And sometimes spending that little bit more just ensures that you're actually getting something from it. So you might spend less, but what are you getting out of it? Where to spend a little bit more and to hopefully be guided in terms of that is a good supplement, you're going to see a much better benefit from it.
Another question I had for you here is we've just covered all five of them, right? If you had to choose one of these to do or to start with for a client, and I know it's really hard because everyone has different needs and backgrounds, but if you had to choose one, which one would you choose and why?
That is a hard one. I mean, if I could just expand on that very slightly,
Sure.
so then people could listen, maybe like get something that's going to be relevant for them. If you are really time poor and making dietary changes seems really difficult for you in your current life stage, go the multivitamin and get a really good quality one to make sure you're getting all the micronutrients. If you are someone with insulin resistance, or that's a concern, you have PCOS, go the low glycemic carbohydrate. If you are concerned about cholesterol and you have a lot of animal protein in your diet and it's of a more fatty content, so you're not going for lean ones, then go for the plant-based one. Just generally, in a day-to-day basis, we should just be trying to decrease trans fats and increase the other healthy fats. So I know that that didn't really answer your question exactly. It is so hard to say, but I really feel like it's super different for everyone.
No, I loved that answer. So thank you for even bringing it down to that extra level of specificity that you are great at. So I love that.
Right.
Was there anything else that you wanted to tell me about, your take on the study or any other points here that you feel like are really relevant based on our discussion today?
I think it's important to remember when you're looking at nutrition, it's a long-term game and any positive step is a positive step. So if you are going to make any changes, just go for small steps in the right direction. And even that you're going to see benefit from. So it doesn't need to be making all of these changes at once.
Okay, thanks for that. Because, yeah, looking at all of these 5 points, yes, on one hand, it's 5 things, but still, this is 5 things in the middle of probably 20 other things that you're considering. when you are really trying to improve your fertility. And so, again, I love that advice, just taking it one step at a time. Please don't get overwhelmed. Let's just choose somewhere and start, slowly implementing one. And then maybe in a few weeks, try the next one, right? If the first one's going smoothly. So, yes, really appreciate that reminder. I wanted to just do a quick recap, and then I wanted to share with the listeners where we can find you as far as further supports if they want to connect with you, and maybe how to work with you as well too. So first off, the 5 different changes that you can make to help support your fertility and increase it by up to 69%. The 5 points there, according to the study, are swapping low-fat dairy to full-fat dairy, swapping the trans fat for monosaturated fat, swapping the refined carbs for those low GI carbs, including that plant protein, right? And also taking that multivitamin. So that is all 5 there. Grace, again, where can we get a hold of you, or where can we find you?
So I'm most active on Instagram over at _fertility nutritionist. I'm always so happy to chat to everyone. So just always, whenever, reach out and say hi. I do love a good chat in the DMs. I work one-on-one with women as well as in programs and through courses. And
You have a really great array of services. So I'm sure if anyone is interested in helping support their fertility through nutrition with you, there's definitely going to be a good fit for them somewhere along your suite of services. Thank you so much, Grace, for sharing your wisdom with us once again. I really appreciated you breaking this down with me. And until next time, I'm sure I'll talk with you soon.
thank you so much. And thanks for having me on.
Thank you for allowing me to share these stories, information, and tips with you, or really just allowing me to connect with you on a subject that's so dear and important to your life. Please make sure to subscribe to the podcast and do me a solid and share this with your friends or anyone that you think might benefit from hearing this. Also, I'd love it if you could leave a rating or review for a deeper dive on today's episode, bonus content, and to connect with others in this space. I invite you to join True Fertility Tribe Facebook group. And last but not least, let's be friends on Instagram, where I post almost daily. You can find me at True Fertility. Wishing you all baby dust. Till next time. Bye.